On today's show, Tucupita Marcano, Groome, and a bunch of other minor leaguers. That's right, some Padres players getting involved in yet another gambling scandal, reacting to the lifetime ban that Marcano received, as well as, obviously, the baseball that happened last night, the Padres' disappointing performance against the Angels, the call-up of Adam Mazur to start tonight's game in light of the injuries to Yu Darvish and Joe Musgrove. So lots to talk about. No more time to waste. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Padres, your daily San Diego Padres podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Padres podcast, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for Tuesday, June 4th. As always, I'm your host with sometimes, occasionally, but certainly not always the most, Javier Reyes. You can follow me on Twitter at Javipeno, as always, Javiipeno, for whole months of Padres degeneracy and nonsense. So go check that out. And you can also check out my work at Just Baseball, where I write sometimes. And then also I do a podcast over there called Baseball versus the World, if you like general baseball evergreen topics. But today's show will not be about evergreen topics. It is about the now. We are talking about Tucupita Marcano's lifetime ban from Major League Baseball. That's what we're going to start off with. And then we're going to get into last night's game recap, as well as talking a little bit about Adam Mazur and just where this Padres pitching situation is. I want to say, first of all, apologies for the delayed upload. Yesterday was a little bit crazy for me, and then some developments occurred for me in the morning. So what can I say? We're a little bit late, but better late than never, folks. Let me tell you. Let's talk about this, though. Wow. Look, we've had a lot of discourse over gambling over the last few months, especially because of one Sir Shohei Ohtani. But this one, the latest one, is just another one on the long line of issues that we've seen kind of develop. Firstly, I want to say sports world has been crazy lately. So seeing all this, if you want to like tune out and just like take a break and like watch old Padres highlights like 2021 Myers, I understand that. But to talk about this, firstly, The Athletic did a nice like kind of summary by Lucas Weiss, I'm sorry, over The Athletic on this, kind of summarizing it. But just to give it for people who don't know, Tucupita Marcano, among many others, a few bunch of minor leaguers were investigated by Major League Baseball, and they were found to be, guilty of placing illegal bets on Major League Baseball games. Marcano, though, is the biggest one. He has been permanently banned from Major League Baseball and is the first ban since Pete Rose in 1989. Reportedly bet over $150K across 231 bets and won just 4.3% of them. So that's pretty wild. Again, hey, anyone out there who needs help gambling wise, that's, there's plenty of resources out there, I guess. So go check that out. But others to receive punishment: Groome, also of the Padres, Michael Kelly from the Oakland A's, minor league infielder Jose Rodriguez from the Phillies, and then minor league pitcher Andrew Saalfrank from the Diamondbacks. The Department of Investigations found all four were MLB-related bets while they were in the minors. First of all, there's a lot to react to. And on the surface level, first of all, Marcano did have a couple games that he played for the Padres. It does not seem like these bets were made while he was at the Major League level. That's not what it seems like was happening, although they were Major League Baseball bets. Really, really nuts. Really nutty story. And we talked about this a little bit months ago when the Ohtani news came out. And I think that what we're seeing is it's just really impossible to ignore, in my opinion. It's really impossible to ignore the proliferation of gambling through not just how much it's been reported on and we've had these scandals and whatnot, but also just the sports marketing machine. And, the NBA, for example, getting really in bed with a bunch of gambling sites. I believe DraftKings, and having like on League Pass that they're experimenting, which is how you can watch like a bunch of different games that are out of your market, of course. And experimenting with putting like odds and bet things and lines and over-unders and all that stuff from the gambling realm and vernacular. So we've seen that kind of develop over these last few months. You had the Jonte Porter situation in the NBA. Obviously, we already mentioned Ohtani. Pete Rose, certainly, right? Like, there's been a lot of this, but it has increased in frequency lately. And I think that's worth mentioning, that I think there's a lot of other layers of this story. First of all, yes, I understand that, and also, by the way, it also just came out kind of wildly at the same time, is that Ipe Mizara, Shohei Ohtani's interpreter, infamously, was found, he pleaded guilty to the charges, and he will serve 33 years, by the way. That's pretty wild. This has not been an isolated incident, obviously, with Marcano, as evidenced by the Ohtani thing. I think that it's just hard to ignore that this stuff keeps coming out now. And I know that there's been some people who, come out and say, we've always had gambling issues. It's like, yeah, but not on this level. And, oh, well, all sports have always been rigged. Forget the gambling. Don't get me started on that. Don't get me started on the people who think that the NFL convinced everyone in the San Francisco 49ers organization, including players, team staff, heck, just people who do marketing there, to convince them all to be quiet and just play along and let the Chiefs win the Super Bowl because Taylor Swift will give them ratings. As if the Dallas Cowboys, the number one sports team in terms of revenue and just money and richness in the world, hasn't made the Super Bowl since before I was born. Yet, yeah, it's rigged for ratings. But anyway, the gambling part of that is very real, and I think that we're seeing that come out more and more. And I think that the Ohtani thing, frankly, not to get overly political on this podcast, that's not the space that I like to be political about things, but the Ohtani truther thing with all of this has been going on for a while. And while I do think that there's like a thinly disguised veil of xenophobia when people talk about the Ohtani situation, where they're like, like Pete Rose, for example, like when he was like, oh, I wish I had an interpreter, that video that came out, like there's just a bad vibe to that and whatnot. But the other thing with the Ohtani situation and what makes it different from this is that, the feds were like, hey, like, first of all, the feds aren't going to like cover for Major League Baseball. At least I don't think they would. Like, why would they do that? So that's crazy. And they found him out. And I think that you just have to kind of go with that. But what's more important about the Shohei Ohtani situation is, first of all, that it arised and it shows you that you could still have some outside influences that are impacted by the gambling that invade into the sports space. And it could be minor players. And that's the other part of this. Minor league players. If there's going to be, which I imagine everyone's going to talk about this, if there is a big gambling fix for a big playoff game, frankly just any game at the major league level, and you find that out, it would be, I think, there's a belief that it will be from more minor players and stuff like that. And I think that that's totally fair to bring up because, there's just been such an increase of activity when it comes to gambling. Wherever you go, whenever I'm on YouTube and whatnot, like I will get like a gambling ad when I'm watching sports videos, and that's just kind of where we are right now. It just generates a lot of money, and all these leagues have kind of gotten into bed with it. But I think that there's just so much going on here, and I think that, first of all, just really stinks for Marcano, frankly. One, that you're just this gambler who clearly has some sort of issue there, and the fact that you're like I think he's 24 years old, like maybe could have sniffed the major leagues at one point. I also think it's worth talking about, in the baseball specifically, forget the NBA and NFL stuff I was talking about, that when it comes to baseball, look, sorry, again, not trying to be political, but it's hard to not ignore the conditions we know that minor league players have been in for a very long time. And while they have been getting better, while they have alleviated some of those financial burdens, it's like, yeah, I mean, this is an issue that's specific to baseball. Is like, I wonder why some minor league players might be more not encouraged, but more likely, more vulnerable to placing some bets on major league games, trying to make some more money. Because again, the horror stories you will hear about minor leaguers, like 8 people living in a house together, like all sorts of crazy stuff, and just not having enough money for food. It's hard to ignore that when we're talking about this. But when it comes to Marcano, just I genuinely like a really unfortunate situation, and they cracked down hard, and they kind of had to. Right? Like, you have to. And I think that's what we're going to keep seeing. And I don't think this is going to be the last situation either. I just don't. I don't think anyone else does either, but I just find that when you're placing all these different bets, when we have all these different issues arising, I mentioned the other ones from before, from football to basketball, it's just going to keep happening. And I'm just wondering at this point, when do we get to the moment when, let's say Padres and Phillies in the playoffs, and then we discover a player on one of those teams had a bet, whether it was against themselves or it was for themselves, whatever it is, and then we find out like 2 months later, like that's the nightmare scenario. So part of me would think that these leagues are smart enough to figure out, like, we need to nail this down. Like, we need to be careful. But part of me is like, well, this is how people act, and we've already had some heinous examples of gambling in the past that have tarnished entire World Series in the case of the Black Sox scandal, right? So this is a lot. Obviously, I want to see if we hear any more. But for now, I would tell everybody to ease up on the Ohtani stuff. I know that we're Padres fans, and it's easy to, like, hate the Dodgers. Now, I loved making fun of the Dodgers, saying that Ohtani was clean and then immediately joins the Dodgers. And, oh, no, see, that team curses everybody. That's fun, but I would be careful to put everything in the same bag, other than the fact that the Ohtani situation, Marcano, Groome, all of these guys, that it does show you that the more increased activity in gambling has already resulted in a lot of controversies. Whether or not one is innocent, one isn't innocent, there's just been a lot. So, and it's not going to end. Not in my opinion. Not for the foreseeable future, either if gambling is distanced away from the major league sports teams, or if they just have to take time to figure this out and lock it down. I don't know. I guess we'll just have to see, folks. But that, of course, is not all we're going to be talking about in today's episode, guys. Instead of talking just about gambling, we got to talk about some Padres. Let's talk about some fun, even though it was a very much not fun game, ladies and gentlemen. But before we get into that, I just want to take a second to talk to you about our friends over at Game Time. We love them very much. You know why we love them very much? Because they love you very much, because they love taking care of you and helping you get those tickets to all those games you want to go to. You want to go to Petco? Well, so do I. I'm planning sometime in, I think, August. August, right? It's kind of wild that we're in June, by the way. Doesn't that freak you guys out? Anyway, I'm planning to go to some Padres games, and Game Time is the app to go to. It's an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. So that's right. So say you don't know if you're going to be free. Right? Let's say to all my East Coast friends, you're in the city, you don't know if you're going to be free, you don't know if you're going to a restaurant, you don't know if your work is taking too long, the commute, whatever, and then you find out you're free. Well, guess what? They have all sorts of deals. Like I just mentioned, it can get cheaper down to the moment. They have flash deals. They have different zone deals. It's like an entire section of the stadium will be like a little bit off, all sorts of stuff. You can take the guessing out of buying tickets. You can view images from your from the seat to see exactly what it looks like. Lowest prices guaranteed. All-in prices. They got you covered. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Game Time is awesome. I really, really love Game Time. Lowest prices. They also have event cancellation protection, job loss protection. If you find better seats, they'll credit you back with that if they're in the same section. So go check that out, guys. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off, folks. Your first purchase. Terms apply, but again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed with Game Time. And just like that, ladies and gentlemen, we are back here on the Locked On Padres podcast, your team every day, free and available on all platforms. Again, my apologies for the late upload, but we are here. We are here, and we are here to stay. But let me tell you, you know who wasn't here yesterday? The San Diego Padres offense. It was really rough, losing last night's game by a score of 1-2. And I imagine that the Padres Twitter, the Padres Reddit, the Padres fan circles, the local bar in San Diego, that everyone's like, my God, we can't beat the Angels now. We just beat the Royals in a series. And that team was like 35-23 coming in that series. And then they drop it to a team that has been one of the worst in baseball for a long time. And also without their best player in Mike Trout. So first of all, let's just get into the stats. First of all, Tyler Anderson carving up the Padres. He's actually low-key been like pretty solid this year. And fun fact, your boy wanted him a few years ago on the team. I thought that he was an interesting pitcher, but he does really well in this game. The Padres just couldn't seem to make hard contact, at least not hard enough, and not hard enough consistently. 6 2/3, only giving up 1 earned run on 5 hits. Did walk 3 and strike out 2. Whenever you see the more walks than strikeouts, that's usually a sign that it wasn't the best hitting night. Again, my thing though is also the Padres have been good offensively this year, so I don't want to kill them for just having a bad kind of game. Right? Like that happens sometimes. Jackson Merrill got a little bit robbed of a hit. David Peralta got robbed of a hit. Like it happens sometimes. And there was other things that happened in this game. First of all, forgot to mention our guy, the knuckleball king, 3.98 ERA now, Matt Waldron. Shout out to all the people, maybe from the Reddit, the Twitters, and the local bar, that were getting on me for saying that I wanted to give this guy more time. Ever since the D-backs start, in which he gave up 8 runs, 7 earned across 3 innings. 5 1/3 for 2 runs, 5 2/3 with only 1 run, 5 innings with 2 runs, 7 innings with 0 runs, and then yesterday 6 1/3, giving up only 1 earned run on 2 hits, no walks, and 4 Ks. The guy's okay. And remember, he is a 5 starter. Matt Waldron has low key, especially as of late, really helped alleviate the issues with the Padres team when it comes to the pitching rotation and their injuries. One of the things with the Padres this year is while the offense has been better, they've been better in high leverage. They've had, Dylan Cease be an ace, and while he's fallen off recently, I think he's going to be great soon. They've had some issues with the starting pitching rotation. Michael King being really unpredictable for a lot of this year. But Matt Waldron seems to be getting better and more consistent. Yes, it is a bad Angels team. I understand that. Yes, last start, it was against a Marlins team. I understand that. But even when it's against the bad teams, when your 5 starters putting up numbers like this, that plays. And it plays for a while. So Matt Waldron deserves a lot of credit. And I really don't think that he's been getting it nearly as much as he should. Basically just gives up a Willie Calhoun single, and that's basically it. And the Angels eventually end up taking the lead off of AJ Morejon allowing a sacrifice fly. But that's not all that bad. So I'm not going to get on Morejon and say, oh, here we go again. Morejon in high leverage. There's been worse outings that you could have. Maybe he got out of his system. Jeremiah Estrada also appears in this game for 2 outs. He gets them both out. No hits, no walks. But I'm not blaming AJ Morejon. And honestly, I don't think a lot of people are. Don't get me wrong. He has this feeling still that in high leverage situations, it just feels like he doesn't pitch nearly as well. And that he's susceptible to just giving up some hits, just not trusting his stuff. You know what I mean? But his stuff has been good, so I don't want to get on this guy. To me, this is about the offense not showing up. Outside, Manny Machado, who hits a home run in the first inning of this one. And that was it. A lot of 1, 2, 3 innings, a lot of ground outs, just a really poor performance from the Padres hitting. Machado, for the record, really cool. Love to see this from him. He's been really good lately, to the point where I'm getting excited. Not as excited as I have been about Tatis, who has been genuinely really good. He hit a double in this one. 1 for 4, but still hit a double, got an extra base hit. He's been just so much better lately. And Machado, by the way, 2 intentional walks in this one. 2 walks, right? So that's pretty nuts. And a stolen base, going 1 for 2 with the home run. So Machado and Tatis clicking at the right time. I say all that to say, look, the guys are getting better. And over this next stretch, I know people want to panic, but my thing is, I want to wait and see until the end of that A's game. Until the end of the A's series. If the Padres are only 1 game up, following a series against the Angels, a series against the D-backs, and a series against the A's, then we can talk, because that's a large sample size of everyone complaining. Now, I'm not necessarily a strength of schedule believer, but everyone's been complaining about that. Well, if you don't show up against these teams, there you go. You can't complain then. It's not like you guys have been playing the Braves and Dodgers every single time, back to back, right? So that is when I think it's more fair to complain. Otherwise, this is just bats weren't quite there. Machado does hit the ball pretty hard, obviously, for the home run. And yes, AJ Morejon have a little bit of a downfall, I guess you could call it. You know what I mean? He does have this vibe of not trusting him whenever he's, in a high leverage situation. And then some mistakes in the case of Jurickson Profar. Being sent home, that is the big discussion here. Look, my interpretation, should you have sent him there with Machado up? I might not have done that, only because Machado's up and he's been very good lately, and he's the one player that's had the big home run and then they end up walking him afterwards. So maybe you don't, but more importantly, it was a good play by the Angels. Got to the ball quickly, made a really nice relay throw. It happens. I personally would have held him up, but I don't think that's an opinion that I'm ready to fight till the end of the earth in, because there's been plenty of times probably that the Padres have sent runners and they've scored and it was close and we didn't realize it because maybe the other team didn't make the best throw in the world, or maybe because our player was just super fast in that moment, right? So I just think it's a little bit unfair to look at one play and determine why you messed it up. You know what I mean? That's not something I like, but that could just be me. I'd like to hear from you guys though. What do you think? Do you think that Jurickson Profar should have held up, or do you think that, hey, you got to give it to the other team, they made a good play? I'm genuinely curious, so leave a comment in the YouTube if you want, or tweet at me, whatever, and you guys know how to do it. But again, I'm not panicking. Still have to see how the rest of the series goes. We're going to have the start of one Sir Adam Mazur to look into, prospect number 5 prospect, I believe, for the Padres. Their 3rd highest pitching prospect, I'm going to say. I believe he's still behind Lesko. I know that Lesko has been, experimenting and he's getting there, but I think the upside of him is a lot bigger. So that's going to happen tonight. Cannot wait to see that. It's always fun. Always fun to see guys debut. So in my opinion, don't freak out yet. No panic. There's just too much time. Too much time. And I think that this is more of a, we need to see how they do against this part of the schedule. And yeah, you could make an argument that I could extend this wait and see thing until after they face the Mets, because the Mets have also been a crummy team this year. That's totally fair too. So yeah, if by the Mets series and A's series, this team is still only one game up above 500 or God forbid, below 500, then we can panic and then we can start talking about whether or not this team is really good enough and whether or not they are going to be aggressive or should be aggressive at the trade deadline. But folks, that was just the game recap. We got to talk about Adam Mazur, a couple more thoughts on him, and talking about just the general vibe and feeling of Padres starting pitching and maybe whether or not they can make a big trade at the deadline. We will have to see. But first, I want to take a second to talk to you about eBay Motors, ladies and gentlemen. Vroom, vroom. Let me tell you, vroom, vroom. Yeah, everyone loves cars, ladies and gentlemen. Hey, everyone who's seen that Furiosa movie, They love that movie. See what I mean? Everyone loves cars. Now, eBay Motors isn't going to help you with the wasteland and surviving that stuff, but they have all the different parts that you could possibly need. Passion, drive, and patience. That's what makes them great, and that's what makes your ride or die your number one, the best vehicle on the planet. You're going to feel sick when you shop over at eBay Motors. They have everything to level up your vehicle to peak performance, from LED headlights, roof racks, superchargers, plenty more, carpet, whatever you want, right? Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your vehicle, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's guaranteed fit, your part is guaranteed to fit. Every part, ride, every time, or your money back. They kind of just let you know, check mark, that type of thing. They'll tell you if it fits your vehicle. So don't worry. If you're not a car man, if you're like me, you're not a car man outside Furiosa, apparently, then don't worry, they have you covered, guys. So go check that out, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep it alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. eBay guaranteed fit, only available to U.S. customers, though. Go check it out. And we're back, ladies and gentlemen, here on the Locked On Padres podcast. Your team every day, free and available on all platforms, including the old YouTube if you want to see. Say hi to Pac-Man. Leave me a comment. I don't know if I should keep Pac-Man. I had him on here because of Waka. That's the only reason. But now I just have him because he's yellow. You know what I mean? I'm wondering if I should change that up, or should I just not change it? You know, are you guys superstitious? Do I need to remove it and then the Padres will go on a winning streak? You know what? I might just do that. We'll come up with some new figurine that I've got somewhere lying around. But Tatis, as always, don't worry. Last thing I want to talk about is Adam Mazur getting the call up. We've been talking about this for weeks, that this is something that could happen for the Padres. And I think that what's interesting is he isn't the number one pitching prospect. Robbie Snelling is. And he's been really good as of late when it comes to his time in the minors this year. And I think that's why he got the call up. And he's not necessarily a guy that I think that the Padres view as oh man, this guy needs more time. We don't want to rush his development. I think they're just pleasantly surprised with how everything has been going. So they're like, screw it. Let's call him up. This year in AA, across 6 starts, he had a 1.95 ERA, getting a decent ground ball rate, didn't give up many home runs, okay strikeout rate. The big thing with him that I seem to have noticed is that he just throws strikes. He's got a nice fastball that's in the mid-90s, so that's pretty good. And while I'm not expecting him to get like a ton of strikeouts, I think the bottom line is he's just not going to be out of control. Now we'll have to see how it plays out tonight. You know how first game jitters can be a thing. Jack Leiter of the Texas Rangers, he was like one of the number one prospects among pitchers in baseball, and he came out and was just a mess in his first start and clearly pretty nervous. And that's fine. That can happen. And then he's also got a slider. That's kind of his put away pitch. I'm curious to see if that works. I think he's going to throw strikes. I think he could be effective at that. But can you put batters away? That, I think, is going to be the thing. You've got control, but can you put batters away? And the slider, I don't know enough about Mazur's repertoire and how much it's going to work. Hey, maybe this guy comes in and is as good as Matt Waldron, right? In terms of just not the literal skills and the like specifics that they're good at. Like, it's not like Mazur throws a knuckleball. But just in terms of providing that sort of value, the Padres could really need that. They're saying that Joe Musgrove, that they're hoping could maybe make a return in July. I'm just super skeptical about that because I just don't know. I think it is a bad sign that you gave this guy, you shut him down last year, in theory to just have him ready for next year, and he comes back and is like immediately hurt again. He's struggling to pitch, and right when he's starting to get better, he goes back on the IL. So again, still preparing for the worst when it comes to Joe Musgrove. And Yu Darvish it's not that I'm preparing for the worst with him. It's just that he's older and he's always had a history of health concerns. And so while he might pitch well, it's totally possible that he comes back from the IL, delivers 2 gems. The problem is that threat of an IL stint is always there. So Adam Mazur tonight is really big. It's going to be a really big development for this Padres team, and I'm curious to see how he, acclimates to Major League hitting. Yes, he has a bad ERA in AAA this year. Across 4 starts, he has 7.11 ERA this year. But first of all, the home run fly ball stuff was out of control to 18.2% rate. That's ridiculous. And from what I understand, the Pacific Coast League is just like a hitter's paradise. So I'm not saying that he hasn't pitched great, but I've just heard that specific league is just like hitting on the moon, and it's like it inflates a lot of guys' stats. And that probably is part of the evidence for why, while yes, he's been bad lately, why the Padres are like, we're still calling him up. So I'm not expecting like the world from this kid, but it's really exciting. This is what's fun about having a farm. It is not because I think Adam Mazur is the next Dylan Cease. That's not what I'm saying. What's fun about having farm is the depth. Having it that when you have your pitchers get injured, which is happening all the time these days, by the way, all the time, all across the board, teams are dealing with this a lot. From Tommy John surgeries to just regular injuries. That keeps happening. So it's nice to have depth. It's nice to have guys that you kind of don't know what they're going to do. That's like a good thing. It's really cool that the Padres heading into this year, you had a Randy Vasquez, you had a Johnny Brito, you had who else? A Drew Thorpe, right? Obviously, who gets dealt away in the Cease deal. But it's just cool to have guys that aren't old, washed up. We already know what they are guys. Like a Rich Hill, like a Vincent Velasquez, like a Jake Arrieta. What do all those 3 share in common? They've all made big starts for a team that was trying to make the playoffs. That's a bad sign. There are plenty of teams in baseball that have the Rich Hills of the world. No offense to Rich Hill, he had a decent career. I'm just saying, he was bad at the end, and he was bad for the Padres. That there are all these guys that make these starts because these are teams that are in rebuild, and they're just trying to get through the season. But when you're a contender and consistently find yourself in those moments, this is why our farm is good. We don't know what's going to happen with Adam Mazur tonight. We don't know if down the line, Robbie Snelling is the Cy Young guy, or not Cy Young, but like a Rookie of the Year candidate. I don't know. This is why it's fun, though, having a lot of I don't knows instead of players that you're just like, can he maybe find the fountain of youth? And it almost never happens, right? So I'm really excited about the start, and I'm curious to see how it plays out. And I think depending on how it plays out, Schilt was like, this isn't necessarily just a spot start. I think it's going to depend. Look, I think Waldron was like one more bad start away from potentially getting sent down or out of the rotation and putting in a Brito or Vasquez at the time before the pitchers were hurt, obviously, in the case of Vasquez. But look what happened. So give him time. Don't expect him to be amazing. And frankly, I really do like that it's not like he's facing Murderer's Row to start off, Adam Mazur. So that's really cool. I'm expecting him to start strikes, be consistent, work counts, and just hopefully be okay. Be okay, right? That can happen. And if anything, if it is only one start, I feel okay about it against this Angels team. And the Padres just need to fill innings at this point while those 2 guys are hurt. So we'll see how it pans out. Last thing I wanted to mention is just the in general worries about the Padres rotation with Darvish and Musgrove, both of which not just being, oh, they're hurt. It's like, no, this is like something that could happen again. We don't know when Musgrove's going to come back, frankly. I know they said July, but I don't know. And we also don't know if he's going to be at his best. Yes, he was good those last couple starts, but, is he even going to be any good? Is this like a lost year for him? I hope not, but it could be. By the way, really quickly, I want to just mention, I've seen a lot of people say Musgrove, ever since he got paid, just fell off. Not true. He got paid in the middle of the season. If you guys remember, before the trade deadline, he was extended. They've been working on an extension all the time, right? Like all that time they're working on an extension. He was electric for the second half of that year. And by the way, electric in the playoffs. You remember that start against the Mets famously? And against the Dodgers, he produced. So yes, he got hurt after that. But he also got hurt after that in a freak weight room incident. And when he came back last year, he was good until he got shut down for the season. So I don't like this whole Musgrove fell off as soon as he got paid. That's not true. It's just not true. And then Darvish could get hurt at any time. So that creates this situation where if you're a contending team in the Padres, what are they going to do? Are they already looking for trade guys? I imagine they are. I'm assuming that Preller's been looking at everyone in baseball. And there's a bunch of different candidates, right? The Astros have not been very good this year for the most part, so a lot of their pitchers are on the market. Framber Valdez, Justin Verlander. Not a big fan of the latter, only because I'm scared that it would cost too much. I know he hasn't actually been this good this year. His FIP is really bad. It's like a full like 2 runs higher than his 3 ERA right now. And I just don't trust a guy like that. I don't want to bet on another old guy. For a team that, it's not like this would be an embarrassment of riches if they were to acquire Justin Verlander. It's not like we know King will be great, and we know Musgrove will be great, and we know Darvish will be great. In that case, yeah, let's take a shot on Verlander. Why not? I'd love that guy as like your 4th best starter, apparently, right? But for me, I just don't trust that. And then Framber Valdez, he's an interesting one, but I don't know. The Astros just, I'm not getting a vibe that they're going to completely tank this year, right? And I know that Framber Valdez hasn't been as good as he usually is, 3.95 ERA, but I feel like he'd cost a decent amount. I think he's under control for a little bit. This is the big question is, what do the Padres do? Do they go for a top-of-the-line starter? Do they go for Valdez? Do they go for Verlander? Do they go for Jesus Luzardo? Famously, the Marlins, the team that the Padres just dealt with when it came to trade negotiations for Luis Arraez. Do they do that? Or do they go for some more lower-tier options? Guys like Brady Singer of the Kansas City Royals. I don't know, because Brady Singer is on a team that's like pretty good right now. So I don't think Brady Singer is going to happen. And he's also just been electrically good. Like, he's been really good. So that's not going to happen. He's probably part of the big fish of Luzardo, Verlander, and Valdez, frankly. But in terms of the lower tier guys, Eric Feed is an option of the White Sox. He struggled a bunch. Obviously, he wasn't very good in the past. Went to the KBO League, came back, has been really electric this year, despite not being good for so long. He could be an option. He's 31 years old, and yes, he's under contract, so that might mean you have to give up a little bit more. But the White Sox are quite literally like the worst team in the history of the damn sport. So I'm just not, I don't think that you have to worry about the White Sox deciding to hang on to him. It is a dumb team, so be prepared for that, right? This is a real thing that happens where like I just start to worry. Especially with Chicago teams. By the way, fun fact, the Chicago Bulls, which are also owned, same thing as the White Sox by Jerry Reinsdorf, have been horrible, and they like refuse to make any trades. Maybe Reinsdorf does the same thing. So keep an eye out for that, but Eric Feed could be an option. You've also got apparently Tyler Anderson of the Angels, a guy that I've liked before. Trevor Rogers of the Miami Marlins, if we want to just go back to the Marlins. He hasn't been very good. He basically peaked that like rookie year. It would kind of be like a reverse Chris Paddock situation, where the Padres gave up on Paddock despite having that rookie of the year, electric first year with the team. They gave up on him and whatnot. And then, Marlins, maybe they give up on him. Maybe he can come over and he can be great. Hey, look, I've been seeing Ryan Weathers dealing for that team. I know, really frustrating. And then the last one that I think people should keep an eye on is Paul Blackburn of the Oakland A's. He hasn't been awesome this year. And in general, he's not all that awesome. He's just solid. He's a guy that's got a low 4s ERA. If your thing is, I want the Padres to get a pitcher who's just going to not have a high ceiling, but just have a really high floor and be solid, Paul Blackburn might fit the bill there. The Padres haven't made, I don't think, a trade with the A's in a while, by the way. But so far this year, he is on the IL, which might make it, his last start was May 10th, might make him a little bit cheaper. I am hoping to God that he's not like out for the season, and I just didn't Google that beforehand. But in general, just been okay these past couple of years, and I don't think he would cost much. So it depends on what the Padres want to do. Do you want to super go for it? I think that's going to also depend on how the team's doing, frankly. If by the end of this stretch that we've been talking about, at the end of this A's and Mets stretch, they're like 8 games over 500, then maybe, yeah, the team starts getting more aggressive. We have to see how they are at the deadline. I think this is going to be really key, because if they're good, I think you go for like a Blackburn, someone that's just not going to cost too much. I just don't want this team depleting the farm, because that's what they've been doing for years, and it has not resulted in consistency whatsoever. Yes, it's awesome when this team makes the playoffs. I've joked before, I literally think they can make the World Series more than they can, or win the World Series more than they can make the playoffs. Does that make sense? No, but it still does. You know what I mean? So I think it depends. Do you go for some lower tier guys, or do you go for Jesus Luzardo? And you just decide, you know what? Screw it. We're the Padres, and if there's one thing Preller's good at, it's replenishing that farm system. You give up all that stuff for Jesus Luzardo. Hopefully it's not too much. Maybe you hope the Marlins are being dumb, right? You bring him in, yeah, that feels great for a team. But at what cost, and especially for a guy whose job could potentially be on the line, Preller might be like, screw the future, I'm just trading for everybody right now. We'll see. Big times ahead for the San Diego Padres, folks. It is a big stretch if you are a fan of this team, and I am very curious to see how it all plays out. But however it plays out, we will be covering it here on this show every day, guys, as always. But that about does it for today's edition of the Locked On Padres podcast, the only pod that may be better than the Padres themselves. Remember to subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts from. Follow it on YouTube as well. And until next time, stay safe and, of course, stay faithful. My fire faithful homies, take care.